One of the issues with case method is how do you prepare to teach a case? Case method will put a greater burden on the instructor because it's going to require you to read the case carefully, making notes in the margins and elsewhere, to keep track of the key problems as they bubble up, the key bits of data, the key quotes or bits of information that you want to remember. I think if an instructor has not prepared the case as he would expect a student to prepare it, that you haven't done your job. Sometimes I'll see faculty who will either buy a teaching note and just sort of skim it, or they'll assume that case method is simply presenting problems and letting students discuss it. And I would say that that instructor is underprepared. So in my view, I believe that we should do the analysis that we expect our students to do in detail, have that written down, and if you're teaching with a group of colleagues, say multiple sections, you have the opportunity to share your notes and your analyses, and you can build a collective teaching note. We'll talk some more about what's in a teaching note in a moment. You can pull all that together and, just like the students are, benefit from having that conversation with your colleagues. If you're teaching by yourself, this is much more difficult, of course. But the importance here is to avoid hypocrisy. Don't ask your students to do something that you wouldn't ask them to do, and I think that's really important. I think you could map out your topical discussion. So depending on the issues that you want that case to address, whether it's finding the hurdle rate or analyzing net present value or learning to value a firm or trying to understand the difference between strategic planning and strategic execution. If you map out what topics you want to touch on in that class, that 90-minute class, then you have a sense of the pieces, the structure, not only of the course now, but of the individual class. And in my experience, you can start with 3 fundamental chunks: problem identification, analysis, and action planning, and maybe action implementation if you're an active user of role plays, as I am. So mapping out the topical discussions that you want to have happen, and then planning how each chunk might be approached and left by asking the right questions or having little bridge comments. There's also a need to plan for what happens if a student does this or that. The first time you teach a case, you probably won't know what the what-ifs are, but the more you teach a particular case and it therefore becomes a part of your repertoire, you'll pick up ideas or questions that students may have. Sometimes that means you have to go back and revise the case to add data or take something else out or reword it because it was confusing. I see this all the time. I've written over 300 cases, and frequently when you teach it the first time, oh man, I should have put that in, or ooh, the way I phrased that paragraph is really confusing to people. I need to sort that out, and you can go back and do a version 1.2 and make it better. So planning for the what-ifs. You'll develop a case folder for each of the cases that you teach, and this will become a part of your repertoire. If you were a singer, there would be songs that you could sing. If you're an artist, techniques that you could employ. If you're a business, capabilities that you have or don't have. So every time you add a new case to your repertoire, your ability to mix and match and draw from that will expand. So I now have, at the end of my career, 5 file cabinet drawers full of cases, and that's winnowed because some have been tossed out over the years, organized alphabetically, and I know what each of them teaches and what it doesn't teach, and I have a way of teaching each case, a way that it sings for me, but maybe not for other people, and that becomes a part of who you are. So your case files, if you will, a folder for each of your cases will be an important addition to your professional development. You can consolidate your analysis and your preparation for each case into a teaching plan, and it's a lot to do for the first time. So people will frequently say, In my institution, I'm not really rewarded for being a better teacher. This is a waste of time. That's up to you. And it has to do with our earlier discussion of how institutional culture will affect your choice of methodology, regardless perhaps or independent of your own philosophy and thoughts about how people learn best. So if you find yourself at an institution that only values the publication of A-level referee journal articles, you may not be interested in teaching cases because it's going to require more time, especially up front, to prepare for what's going on in the classroom, and that's time that will be taken away from your data collection, analysis, and publishing. Some institutions will say any time spent on teaching is a waste of time. That's not my philosophy. My belief is that faculty at any university are going to be required to teach courses. And in our doctoral program at Harvard and also here at the Darden School, we had a required course on teaching. So if a third of your job or a half of your job, depending on your institutional demands, is going to be in the classroom teaching other people, we believe you should be skilled at that. You should be proficient at that. So I would disagree with the philosophy that any time spent on effective teaching is a waste of time. In fact, I would say it was negligent and almost unethical to go into a classroom and simply read from articles or regurgitate what you've learned in a unilateral kind of way. So people will criticize case method because it makes a greater demand on both students and the faculty, particularly in those first few times you're teaching a case. After you've taught a case 5, 10, 15 times, it will sing for you or not. You have to find a way to make it sing so that you know how to teach a class that works for you and your style and your students. And then your advanced preparation will begin to shrink and you won't have to spend as much time as you originally did. It will always be good to go back and review the case, read it, refresh your memory, and if you've got extensive teaching plans, then that will be a big help to you because you can refer to your notes from the previous year. So you develop, every time you teach a new case, repertoire of materials that you can rest assured and have a confidence that it will have high energy impact in the classroom, that it will sing, if you will, in the room. And that repertoire will be a very important asset in your professional portfolio.